Welcome, and thank you for joining us on OCMC Interviews, our new online series. This series is produced by the Orthodox Christian Mission Center, the official missions agency of the Assembly of Canonical Bishops of the United States. My name is Milica Minic, and I'm the admin assistant for the Missionary department.
And I'm Daniel Kindle. I am the Ambassador Events Coordinator in the Development Department.
And I'm Father Stephanos.
Presbytera Alexandria.
And Moses Anastasios.
And Ethan Patrick.
It is OCMC's mission to make disciples of all nations by uniting people to Christ and His church. We pray that this video can help connect and inform communities nationwide about the various ministries and missions serving around the world through OCMC. Joining us is Father Stephanos and Pres Alexandria Ritsi, who are currently missionaries serving in Albania.
And we're very happy. Oh, go on, sorry.
Go ahead.
And we're very happy to have you guys. So yeah, please give a greeting. We'd love to hear from you guys.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be with you from a distance. We hope that you all are having a good day and staying safe out there.
And greetings from Tirana, Albania, where it is about 92 degrees Fahrenheit.
That sounds
almost like Florida. Is there humidity there? All right. So before we begin, we're going to start off with the prayer for missions. So Father Stephanos and Presbytera Alexander, would you mind leading us off?
Sure. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, we pray for all the people from all nations, that they may come to know you. Help us to care for the spiritual and physical needs of others around us and around the world. Teach how to show your love and peace to others. Grant us the courage to answer your call. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Preparing for this video, we had the distinct pleasure of speaking with you a little bit, and we loved hearing about your background and your inspiration to answer the call to missions, along with your insight to future ministry. So if you could begin by sharing a little bit about yourself and your background and kind of how you started your journey as missionaries.
And before we start, let's just mention real quick, this is a recorded video interview with the Ritsis, but please, everyone on Facebook, comment below. I'm hoping below is down here somewhere. Comment any questions, ask the Ritsis anything that you would like to know outside of what we hear in this interview. And we're going to be having a little short follow-up video of answering those questions. So it's going to be wonderful. All right. Yeah, start us off, please.
So let's see. I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, while my dad was at seminary. And shortly after that, was when I was 1.5 years old, we went to Africa, where we were serving as Orthodox missionaries inside Nairobi, Kenya. We were there together with Archbishop Anastasios. And I grew up inside the mission field, first in Kenya, and then after that inside Albania. We came back to the United States inside 1998. I went to high school, I went to college, and throughout this time I decided basically that my life goals were to either become a doctor, to become a lawyer, to find some way to be really successful, to have a really nice, fast car, and that's pretty much where my life goals were. Inside university, I started pre-med, and as I was taking classes, you know, it was just something where it was a little bit empty. So then I'm like, okay, let me try pre-law. Maybe something about law is going to be a little bit more interesting to me. I switched to pre-law, and again, there was something that just wasn't quite right. So 2006, my mom said, hey, Stephanos, we're going to have a short-term mission team to Kenya. Can you come on this trip? I'm like, yeah, you know what? I don't necessarily want to go, but my mom's asking me to go, so I'll go with her on this trip. So I went to Kenya, and we're out inside the middle of nowhere, absolutely a very, very poor area of Kenya. And during this trip, there was a sense of peace. It was kind of like everything that had been missing from my studies at university was found here on this trip in the middle of the jungle inside Africa. And at that moment, I realized that my life calling wasn't to be a doctor, wasn't to be a lawyer, but that I was supposed to try and help other people to find the sense of joy that this Christian community, this Orthodox Christian community in Lamu, Kenya had. So I came back, finished my undergraduate as fast as I could, and I went up to Holy Cross, where I met my wife, Alexandria. My future wife, let me say.
And I am originally from Chicago, from Saints Constantine and Helen in Palos Hills, Illinois. And until I was about 12, when I went to Greece, I actually thought that everyone in the world was Greek and everyone was Orthodox. And so that was really surprising for me. Even though my mother is 100% Irish, I still thought just a little bit of her was Greek. And it turned out not to be true, but that also there are people in the world that have never heard the gospel before. And after I visited a monastery just outside of Athens in Greece, I realized that people from South Africa, from England, from Georgia, from all over the world, you have the ability to be Orthodox. And I went back to Chicago. I went to university for 2 years. Then I transferred to Hellenic College, where I met Stephanos. And it wasn't until I met him that I realized that missions and proclaiming the gospel was actually something that you could do within the Orthodox Church. And when I met him and I learned about that, it was like a light bulb went off in my head, and I realized that that is what God was calling me to do.
What was that discernment process like? Since I know you're a clergy family now, so how did you decide that you wanted to primarily serve the church in that capacity as a missionary?
For me, it was something that I felt called to do, definitely. But when Stephanos kind of gave me the ultimatum that he would only marry somebody who wanted to be a missionary, it kind of like, oh, okay, well, if that's something that, we feel called to do together, then we'll do it if it's God's will.
I think for me, it went back to that experience in Africa. It's like when I had that experience in Africa, that's the moment that I knew that I was supposed to be a missionary, and everything after that was just to try and reach that goal. I went to seminary to try and prepare to become a missionary. Mm-hmm. And all of that was just a understanding that instead of just running off right now, I needed to try and prepare myself as best I could to be able to be more efficient inside the mission field.
And how did seminary help prepare you for that?
So,
do you think people need to attend seminary in order to become a missionary?
Mm-hmm. I think seminary was very valuable. I've seen a lot of missionaries who've entered the mission field and then left the mission field. And it seems like those people who finish seminary generally seem to stay longer, which as a long-term missionary, it's important to stay there to establish a sense of continuity, because those first years, basically, you're learning culture, you're learning language, and just becoming part of the local church. And then after that, you start to become efficient. But I don't think that it would necessarily be a requirement to enter the mission field. Missions work is very broad. It's not something that only theologians are needed inside the missionary field. I think that seminary makes more of a difference because it indicates that the reason that you have this calling, it's not based in some romanticism or escapism, like I just want to leave the United States and get out of here, or oh, how romantic it would be to go and be a missionary inside, I don't know, Bali or somewhere like that. But if you have decided you're going to go through seminary, you've decided you're giving your life to the church to a certain extent, and you can have that same calling even without going to seminary.
Right. Where did Daniel go? There he is. Okay.
No, we can keep
So
going.
I guess you guys went to seminary, and then did you go straight to Albania, or did you
How did you decide going to Albania? Or is there any other country that you would wanted to consider your ministry for being a missionary?
So when we were thinking about where we were being called to be missionaries, I have a very fond memory. Father Martin, Stephanos' father, being the director of the mission center, I would always run up to him and say, "Oh, Dad, what about Bali? Can we go to Bali?" And he would say, "Alexandria, you need to pray about it." And then, a few days would pass and I would run up to him again. "Oh, Dad, can we go to Kenya?" And he would say, "Alexandria, you need to pray about it." Few days go by. "Oh, Dad, can we go to Cameroon?" And finally he's like, "Just pray about it. You need to pray about it."
Mm-hmm.
So we actively prayed about it, not just speaking to God, but also listening to what he wanted us to do. And that is when our whole plan for Albania really came together, as the Archbishop asked us to come here to learn and study and work with him, as well as with the Albanian people. And, it's been a real blessing that we've been able to do that, because he is one of the leading modern day missionaries in the Orthodox Church. And after 7 years, we can happily confirm on our part that this has been the best choice for us.
And Melitza is going to be back shortly. She lost connection, but it's okay. We'll keep going. No, that's really cool, and just I think it's awesome that at least from the conversations we had in our previous interviews, a lot of it is about prayer and not expecting to find the perfect spot right away, but God intends for you to go somewhere, and that's revealed after time, whether depending on how long that is. It could be days, weeks, or even years. But I like how that you guys spent the time to consider all the different places that you can go to, but laying it into God's hands and to deciding Albania is where you're needed. And with your experience in Albania, would you mind sharing a little bit about that? Like, what is your ministry like? What type of service do you do? And how is the church growing in Albania through the ministries of OCMC and your efforts?
So before we talk about our ministry and everything, we just want to touch a little bit about Albania as a country itself. St. Paul actually came through Albania on his ministry, and he is one of the first people to bring Christianity to Albania. And Albania actually found itself, between the East and the West. And just the other day, we celebrated the feast day of St. Asti, who was martyred in 98. And so that just tells you how close Albania is to the, first century Christian church. After Albania was Christianized, the Ottoman Empire came through, and they really forced people to be non-Christian. And the people at first resisted because they were Christian people, but eventually about 70% of Albania converted to Islam.
And so, what's interesting is when you look at the surrounding areas, for example, Greece, the majority of the people inside Greece, they didn't convert. Mm-hmm. And so you look and say, what was different inside Albania? And looking at the history of how things happened inside Albania and the Ottoman Empire, is one of the most important things that we see was that there was there was a lack of literature. There was a lack of enculturation of the church to a certain extent inside Albania that hadn't been experienced inside Greece. A lot of things were inside the Catholic Church were done inside Latin. A lot of things inside the Orthodox Church were done inside Greek. You see that because it was an area that was a little bit more remote, you had difficulty educating the clergy. So you had clergy who weren't necessarily as educated as some areas, which made it harder for them to be able to explain to the people the differences between the different religions. You saw also that there was a pretty strong effort by the Ottomans to convert the populace here. It wasn't done necessarily inside most cases at the edge of the sword, but there was very strong economic pressure to convert, to the point where, I mean, basically the general consensus from historians is that it was almost impossible to resist this economic taxation that was levied on Christians. So eventually the Ottoman Empire falls, Albania gains independence, and the country here inside Albania was on its road to try and become having freedom of religion. What happens then after that, though, is after a brief period of time, they decide that it's good for the church here to be autocephalous. And after a protracted series of events, eventually the church received autocephaly inside 1937, which means it gained its own ability to govern itself. So the Archbishop of Albania is one of the primates of the Orthodox churches, and he's equal to, for example, the Archbishop of Greece or to the Patriarch of Jerusalem. He's one of the leaders of our church. This was a very brief period. Almost immediately after that, you see World War II come. And after World War II, you see the rise of communism. With communism, there was probably the most severe persecution against religion that you could imagine here. It was constitutionally outlawed to have any kind of expression of faith by any person, by any institution. Absolutely everything was outlawed. So like if you made the sign of the cross, you could get put in jail for 7 years. If your neighbor said, oh, I saw my neighbor making prosphora, making holy bread, secret police would come, they'd search your house to see if you had a seal. If they found a seal, they'd put you in jail for 7 years.
Stories that we still hear nowadays of people who remember their grandparents dyeing red eggs during Pascha, and their grandmother saying, you know, you cannot tell anybody that this happened. This is a secret. And then they would bury the red eggshells in the garden so that nobody would find them.
Well, my favorite story of what they would do with the red eggshells is in Berat, some of the believers would save their red eggshells, and then secretly, at a time when there weren't any secret police, they would go and they'd put them in the trash cans of the party members, the Communist Party members. And that way, when the secret police were going through people's trash after Easter to see who was practicing Christianity, all the party members would look like they'd been dyeing eggs and cracking them. So then communism fell and religious freedom started to come to Albania. There had been, at this point, a complete destruction of the church here. There were just a few priests and clergy who had survived, and most of those people had been ostracized, had been persecuted throughout their entire lives, and were just imagine living all those years under communism under absolutely extremely difficult situations because you had maintained your faith. And
you'd be very
it was so bad. What was that?
You'd be very skittish to come out and practice again. Yeah.
I think even a bigger issue was the fact that just physically they were exhausted. Like if you see pictures of them, you can see they're emaciated. Yes, and just the very, very difficult situations that they went through. And I mean, more importantly for the life of the church here, there was no bishop. So there was no way to make new Albanian priests to be able to continue the church here. I mean, it was so bad that the Patriarchate was even thinking, what are we going to do with Albania? I mean, this persecution was so bad. Do we have to revoke autocephaly and make it be part of one of the other local churches that's around it? I mean, all of the churches that had been built here that had been from 6th century BC, from all these ancient churches, AD, sorry, 6th century AD, all these ancient churches that had been taken, that had been converted into bars, into hotels, into depots, and I mean, everything was absolutely destroyed.
Yeah.
So what happened is they sent Archbishop Anastasios here. And
what year was that? When did he officially arrive in Albania?
so he came as Patriarchal Exarch in 1991. That means he was sent by the Ecumenical Patriarch to see the situation of the church here inside 1991. And then that was supposed to be a temporary role where he'd come, he'd see what the situation was like, and then he'd return back to his other duties and responsibilities. But while he was here, all of the people really wanted him to stay, and they're like, please don't leave us, can you help us rebuild our church? And after a long, again, prayerful process for him, he accepted the request of the people and of the Patriarchate to stay and to work to reestablish the church here. And in 1992, he was enthroned as the Archbishop. So, basically,
sorry. Yeah, keep going.
Okay, so since Archbishop Anastasios came, it's been something that, I mean, when people talk about the Church of Albania, they often liken it to a modern day miracle, something that had been completely destroyed. Now, I think that there's been 460 churches that have been restored, renovated, rebuilt, built from nothing. You see now that we have 160 clergy who are Albanians who have been ordained and who are serving right now, and I think total about 193, I think 193 have been ordained. Some of them have passed away since then, of course, but you'll see that there's been a great work for building schools, for building hospitals. Just inside Tirana, the hospital that the church runs has had about 2 million visits and analyses that they've performed since its opening.
Oh, wow.
So really it's gone from being a church that was completely destroyed to a church that is vibrant and alive and working to share the message of Christ with all those inside the entire country.
And that's been 30 years. So
yeah, 30 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what were you
saying?
That photo. Keep going. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say there's that photo of Archbishop Anastasios, which is, I think it's very emotional. He's like standing in the rubble, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's a monastery or a church that has been destroyed, but he's just standing there, and it's a great testament to the resurrection.
A lot of the churches and monasteries were like that. I mean, that wasn't just like a photo op where they found a destroyed church, but the vast majority of the churches were in situations like that.
Yeah.
So an interesting thing that comes up is Albania still a mission field? You said something about it's been about 30 years now.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on 30 years since its reestablishment. And I mean, if you go to the cathedral here inside Tirana, it's a beautiful church. And even to the point, like when I was a deacon, I remember most of my liturgies were at the cathedral there. And it's a real cathedral where there's enough room inside the altar to fit the synod of a church and all these priests and all these things like that. And I remember going back to the United States, and sometimes it's like you'd have to readjust your sensing because everything was smaller, it felt like.
Yeah, too many people.
Yeah, but so then, I mean, the question is Albania still a mission field? And Albania isn't as much of a romantic mission field like what you would think when you see on like a movie or a TV. I know for us being here, I mean, even sometimes we get mistaken as being Albanians because we look similar enough to Albanian people, especially Alexandria. Like everyone, when they realize I'm a foreigner, they're like, oh, but your wife's Albanian, right? And so Albania also is, of course, one of the poorest countries in Europe, but it's not anywhere near the levels of poverty that you have inside Africa. And I think that for me, that's like this idea that missions isn't necessarily about going somewhere exotic and realizing humanitarian projects. The church, it's not primarily an NGO. it helps in those fields in ways to be true to her love and her respect for each and every individual who's made in the image of God, and as a way to fulfill the calling of Christ, where he tells us about the story of the Last Judgment inside the Gospels. But all of these works are not the purpose of the church, per se. They're more expressions of her living her ethos. So Albania, simply put, is a Muslim majority country. The last reliable census, we had about 70% of the people who were who declared that they were Muslims, and that was, of course, before communism. After the fall of communism, the Orthodox Church, we think we're about 20 to 24% of the population right now, and there's a lot of work to be done. And this work is pretty urgent. I mean, I just think you have this generation of people who grew up with religion being illicit, being outlawed, and now they're raising their kids. And it wasn't like communism fell and something changed in their mind, and all of a sudden this thing that they had been taught, which was bad, now becomes good. Mm-hmm. So there's still a lot of people who are very leery about the church. I mean, there's a lot of youth and young adults who struggle with this, where they try and come to the church, they find something that they love, something beautiful, and they meet resistance inside their homes with their parents being like, yeah, it's good for you to go every now and then, but don't get really involved, because you're going to become a nun, God forbid, or you're going to become a priest, God forbid. So there's a lot of work that has to be done. And I think if it's not done soon, this generation will not be reached as efficiently, and then they're going to have kids, and it'll be like a cascading effect. Mm-hmm.
Sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
Similar in other ex-communist countries. Very.
Yeah. There's a lot of similarities.
In the States too.
Yeah.
Yeah, because some young adults will explore the Orthodox Church and they bring it home to their families and what they've learned and what they really like about it, and they get negative feedback. And same thing, you'll either become a priest or a nun, or you're joining a weird club or group.
What are those icons?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think something that we're seeing is that if we don't work now, that the delayed effects of the communist persecution are going to lead people away from the church here. Yeah. And so it's really important to be able to act now. And then also Albania, finally, there's a continuous effort that needs to be made because of the diverse demographics to make sure that always religion is a source of reconciliation and healing instead of a source of conflict. And the Balkans are a particularly volatile area to a certain extent. And there's been a lot of difficult events around this area, and the Church of Albania has always worked to try and maintain that love for everyone, no matter if they're Orthodox or Muslim or Catholic. And
I'm going to go a little off script here, but I know back in November, Albania, in the country of Albania, you guys had a really big earthquake, and the church did a lot of wonderful work to help those in the surrounding areas to, in a sense, heal or get back on their feet. I know from one of our past articles, we heard that the churches opened up their doors for people to stay in, to eat and sleep. And how has that played into effect of how people in the country are viewing the church?
So when the earthquake happened, almost immediately, the Orthodox seminary in Shënbëllaq, they opened up their doors, and until about, I think it was right before the pandemic hit in March, maybe 2 or 3 days before, they housed over 200 people at the seminary, and they offered them medical care, they offered them psychological help, they offered them free food, free transportation. And for a lot of those people, I'd say a small percentage of them were actually Orthodox, but for them to see, the Orthodox Church was freely offering this to them, it was a very big message, from God to them, that God loves them And it doesn't matter what you believe, that, you know, the Orthodox Church is here. We are here to serve the people. We are here to love everybody. And I went to Shamblash just a few weeks ago, and there was someone from the village that had come, and they had said, you know, how wonderful and how beautiful and what a blessing it was to be able to have the seminary there and to be able to partake in these things that the church was offering for free for anybody.
And I think it's a continuation of everything that the church has done here.
Mm-hmm.
We have this message that we love people, and we try and express that love for people. And unfortunately, for this region, there's been a lot of situations where that's been able to be expressed. I mean, you had this earthquake, you had the Kosovo refugee crisis here, you had just day-to-day difficulties that everyone faces. And through all that, the church has tried their best to live out that teaching of the church. It's not just words, but it's put into action. I know that the Archbishop often likes to quote a couple different patristic fathers, but also from the Philokalia, Saint Nilas. And he says this quote, "Blessed is the monk who that we could say blessed is the person who considers every human being as God, with a small g, after God." And that's basically what the church here is trying to live. I mean, you see someone else and you don't immediately put them in a category. You don't say, oh, look, you're Muslim. Oh, look, you're Orthodox. But you say, oh, look, you are a person that's been placed in front of me, and I'm supposed to see the image of God inside you and to love you as if I see the image of God in front of me right now.
And that's wonderful that the church has been doing so much, not just for its own flock, but for everyone. And so the coexistence in Albania, how has that history been, the religious coexistence?
Mm-hmm. So this actually ties in with one of the tasks that we have here is, so our seminary here was recently accredited. And as part of that process, for every accredited university throughout the world, you need to be able to have a certain percentage of your teachers that have certain levels of degrees. So during the process, the Archbishop asked if I could go and get my doctorate at Aristotle University in Thessaloniki. And for the last 4 years, I think for the last 4 years now,
I've
been working on that. And it's been studying the transmission of the message of the gospel inside Albania after communism. And one of the great themes for that has been this emphasis on coexistence. Albania, because of its history, has had to experience coexistence. Now, what you see is that in the past, much of this was due to a forced coexistence, you could say. There'd been like pressure to convert under the Ottoman Empire, and then there'd been the power of the state enforcing coexistence. Now the country is in a new phase. We have religious freedom, and there was a serious risk that this relationship between the people of different faiths would deteriorate. I know, like, if you look and you see the missionary activity from different religions, you had some fundamental Protestants who would come in here and they'd create problems. Then you had fundamental people coming from the Middle East or taking students from Albania to go and study inside fundamental schools inside the Middle East and sending them back again, creating problems with this coexistence. And because of that, it was always at risk to a certain extent, but thank God, I'd say that that's been one of the primary focuses of Archbishop Anastasios. And it's whenever you go to a new missionary field, there's this idea that you have to see the local situation. And the local situation in Albania was that this needed to be emphasized. We had a position that could become volatile. And we had to do a lot of work to try and ensure that people focused on seeing the other person with love and respect. I know that it was emphasizing, of course, the past coexistence of Albania, but then also trying to elevate it to a certain extent and to teach people, listen, you've had this coexistence inside the past, and now we're going to explain it in a certain way, like the theological reasons that we do this, and to reach a level of awareness of we do it for these reasons. For St. Maximus the Confessor saying, blessed is the one who is able to love every human being equally. For Christ telling us to love our neighbors, to love our enemies, all of these things. And it just being a very conscious effort. I'd say another important thing that he's worked on is that there's a phrase that he's termed called a dialogue of life. And what this means is that when you have dialogue with people of another religion, you're not necessarily going to sit down and engage in polemics and say, our church believes this and your faith believes that. This is why you're wrong, ABC. But inside the reality of the situation inside Albania, the dialogue of life is more of an attempt to find common areas of concern that you can work together on. For example, let's say the environment. You can have a conference, you can engage in dialogue with each other where you discuss the environment. And this conference allows you to come together to see the other person as an actual human being, to remove this fear or suspicion that you have with them. And at the same time, you actually have a productive topic that you're able to talk about. Or you could talk about religious freedom, to have all of the religious communities together saying, listen, government of Albania, we know that communism was a difficult time. Now we're going to make sure that we have religious freedom. Or tolerance. I know whenever there's a situation where one group starts to attack the other group, there's good enough communication between the leaders of the Orthodox Church, the Catholic Church, the Muslim sects in Albania, that they can get in touch with each other and they say, listen, you know, this event happened. Can you please help to make sure that tensions are diffused instead of this becoming an issue of conflict? So let's say it was a really important emphasis here in Albania.
Yeah, all that's really wonderful. And I would have never thought about any of that. And just thinking about how we communicate the Orthodox Church to those who aren't Orthodox, we tend to fall into that, what you just mentioned, just going down the list of A, B, and C of all the things that we're completely different on and where you're wrong. But I really like that. What was that phrase again?
The dialogue of life.
Yeah, I like hearing about the dialogue of life. Actually, could you repeat that again of what you said about the dialogue of life?
Yeah, so I think that a dialogue of life, you're finding commonalities that can serve as a way to foster contact with each other and remove prejudices and suspicions. But something that's really, really interesting about it is in doing that, it's also a form of witness. For example, like one of the major topics of a dialogue of life is peace. We can basically throughout the world, everybody can say, I believe we should have peace, right?
Yeah, we all want it.
Yeah. But for Christians, for Orthodox, who is peace? Peace is Christ. So we're working to foster peace. We're sharing from the treasure of Orthodoxy what we believe about peace. And in doing this, we're engaging in a form of missions work. Maybe someone isn't necessarily coming and getting baptized today, but we're working to increase the presence of Christ inside those people who are at the conference, inside those people who are affected by the decisions of the conference, the papers of the conferences, in fact, even inside those religions. And maybe it's not as ideal if everybody, let's say, became Orthodox, of course, and was baptized. But to believe that everyone's going to just get baptized, in my opinion, right now, within this next decade, within this next century, is a little bit naive. I mean, the world isn't at a place where that's going to happen. Yeah. So we have an obligation to do what we can to share Christ inside every way possible. And inside the world that we live today, this is one of the most apparent methods that we have to be able to share him.
And it feels like that's a fundamental theme in missions throughout missions history. Like the St. Herman speaking to the Aleuts in Alaska, sharing about the church in relation to what they believed, and with St. Patrick of Ireland sharing on how the Holy Trinity can be explained through a clover, which is really cool. And it's wonderful to see that our churches, especially in Albania, bringing that discussion back, not persecuting people who are having different opinions, or not persecuting, that's not a great word to use, not argumenting or making another person feel defensive about their beliefs, but sharing the commonality between it. And I think that's truly wonderful.
I think there's got to be a sense of security. We're not insecure about our faith. We believe our faith is the fullness of the truth, is the most beautiful, the thing that there is. And if you believe that, you don't need to do that. You share it, you witness to it inside these ways that are not oppressive, and then you trust that people will be drawn to it.
Right. It's like your whole way of being, really.
Yeah.
Not just the theological, mental.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just continuing on with talking about the ministry of missionaries going to Albania from the Orthodox Christian Mission Center. Can you tell us more about what it is that the two of you have been doing in relation to, I know you guys are doing teaching and talking about the cathedral earlier. I remember seeing you guys entered a contest for photography, and you took a picture of the cathedral on Pascha, which was really cool. And I think you guys won the grand prize for that.
Yeah, so that was the Colors of Orthodoxy from the Church of Poland. And the book, here, wait 1 second, I can get it. The book has this picture on the front. Ooh. And this is the picture that Stephanos took for Pascha a few years ago.
But I think in the book it's attributed to Alexandria, and I think that's actually very apropos, because when we first came to Albania, I had taken a high school course in site photography, and we brought a SLR with us, and we're like, okay, we can try and help take pictures and document what's been happening inside Albania. And then I got ordained, and I'm like, oh wait, I can't take pictures because I have to be serving. And so I gave the camera to Alexandria. And very quickly, we realized that Alexandria is an infinitely better photographer than I am.
Did you take any classes?
No classes, no YouTube videos. I just kind of press the button on the cameras. So, it just, everything turns out. Yeah, we shoot in manual, so it's not like I'm just using auto or anything. Stephanos did teach me a little bit, but most of the time in the services and when photographing for church or icons or anything like that, it's really just, it's work for God. And so for people to see what's going on here in Albania and to really, spread the gospel through photography, it's been a blessing to do that.
They use so all of these pictures that Alexandria takes, they use them for Facebook, for books, for newspapers, magazines. Sometimes they'll even say, can you take a picture of this icon? And because the church is still rebuilding, when they install an iconostasi, sometimes they don't have the money to do a hand-painted icon, but they'll take a print of an icon.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just a lot of use for photography here inside Albania.
That's awesome.
And please continue on with sharing of more ministries that you guys are a part of in Albania.
So here in Albania, in addition to photography, I teach English at the Protagonist School, which is the Albanian American school under the Spirit of Love Foundation of the Orthodox Church. It's actually the most affordable private Albanian American school in Tirana. And between kindergarten and 12th grade, there's about 1,000 students. If you count preschool, you can add probably another 400 or 500. And the vast majority of those students are non-Orthodox, and many of them are on scholarships from the Orthodox Church. And many of the teachers are Orthodox who teach there, whether they do specialties like languages or gym or music or art. And it's really just a witness of love by the church to have these teachers who exude the love of Christ. And they're doing this, you know, not only to the Orthodox students, but also to the students who are not Orthodox. So it's kind of like a witness for the church to have these teachers who are Orthodox. As well as teaching English, I also teach Spiritual Journey, which is the catechism program, after school program for the church at the school. And
is it for a certain age group or anybody?
So I think it's from 1st grade, maybe until 9th grade, they have after school. It's normally on Wednesdays, catechism. Okay. And the majority of the students are non-Orthodox. Last year when I taught 2nd grade, and I had 28 or 29 students, and just less than a handful of them were actually Orthodox. And so, you know, you're teaching these children about saints and about feast days and about God and how to love each other. And it's a really beautiful thing. And then you see them, you know, you say, hey, you should come to church on Sunday, you know, Saturday's a feast day, anything like that. And the children, you know, they drag their parents along, and then from across the church, they're yelling, hi, teacher Alexandria. So it's really cute. It's really touching to see that, you know, it wasn't just a lesson, it was something that they're taking home to their parents, and they're continuing the circle.
And so just as a thing to note, English is very valued inside Albania. Mm-hmm. So having American teachers who teach English is really important here. I mean, when you think about it now, English is pretty much the lingua franca. I know I was coming back to the United States last year, 2 years ago, so I forget exactly which year. And we had a layover inside Rome. So I hopped on a bus, and it's about an hour from the airport into the city. The entire bus ride, the people in front of me, it was a person from Germany and a student from China, and they spent the entire hour bus ride conversing inside English. So outside of the United States, outside of England, there's a great value to learning English because it opens up a lot of doors throughout the world to you. So I teach at Logos University now. It's basically the seminary here was accredited, and it came under the university that the church had previously established. And so now it's basically one university with 2 campuses. And I think it's one of the things that Archbishop Anastasios focused on from the very beginning was the creation of a seminary so that we could have local clergy. And you say, why is that important? I think number one, local clergy are able to use the local language. They're able to understand the local context. And eventually you want local clergy so that you can have local leadership of the church. If you compare the Orthodox Church of Albania to some of the other religions, I know that there were hundreds of Catholic priests and nuns and missionaries who were sent. I know that there were probably 600, 700, 800 Protestant missionaries that came into the country. Not entirely sure for how many people came for them as Muslim missionaries, but I know that there were also a significant amount of them. Orthodox Church, I think we never have had more than 20 foreigners working inside the church here. So that made it even more important that the church focused on creating local leadership, local theologians, local catechists who were able to go and help work together with the foreigners, because, I mean, this is the Church of Albania, but also to be able to address that issue that we didn't have as much support. Another reason that the seminary is important is we need to have educated clergy here. We had mentioned briefly, but that had been a bit of an issue during the Ottoman Empire that had led to being one of the factors why people had converted. And the communists actually used that as one of the tools of propaganda. They created this idea that the clergy were uneducated people, that they were dumb, that they were drunkards, all of these kinds of things. And I know I was sitting at a repair shop the other day, and on the TV, they were playing a communist era video. And basically, the entire thing was just of how terrible this uneducated priest was. And it ended up with people dancing around inside the sanctuary of the church and chasing the priest off through the mountains. And they're still playing some of that on television today. So it's very important that the clergy that we have here, they're educated and they receive a high level of education to be able to combat some of that propaganda.
Yeah.
Also, we have changing demographics. More and more people here are getting university degrees. And something that our church believes is that you have to be able to have clergy who are able to connect with the people. One of the ways that you do that is to have them be able to understand the people. So you have an entire parish of people who have bachelor's and master's degrees. Your clergy should be able to engage on that level of engagement. They should be able to have bachelor's and master's degrees as well. So currently I'm an assistant lecturer. Next year, after I finish my PhD, God willing, I'll transition, and the term is you become a full lecturer, and I teach missiology there, or the study of missions. The last thing that I do is I work in the office of the Archbishop. So basically everything inside that office that happens inside English, I'm responsible with helping with. So that means drafting and translating letters, means editing books, but also day-to-day tasks like just anything that might happen inside the office they might ask you to help with. I know this is synthesized really well with my PhD. It's one of the tasks that we had to do was the Archbishop had written a book, and this book had been published inside Greek, but then it was translated into English, and before he was ready to send it for publication, he followed along in Greek while I read every single word of the book to him inside English, and we compared the English to the Greek. And that was absolutely intensive, absolutely tiring, but also absolutely amazing, because I'd read something in English and he'd be following along in Greek and he'd be like, no, you see, that's not exactly what I meant. And like he'd be able to explain all of what he meant about the missiology behind everything that was inside this book.
That's really cool. And just being able to get more information about the study of missions into the world is what we need. We need a lot of that. And I know in addition to all these wonderful things, I even found on YouTube that you have a radio show. And I think it was on YouTube I found it. I think you have a channel, is that correct?
Yeah, so under the Orthodox radio in Albania, Radio Angelia, which means Radio Resurrection, I have a radio show that I do during Pascha Lent and then also during Nativity Lent. And it's based around Orthodox mothering and Orthodox families. And this is the first year that it has also been recorded in English, which has been then put on YouTube.
And do you also talk about the lives of the saints through the radio show too?
Yeah, so this last Lent that I did right before Pascha, the radio show revolved around Orthodox saints that our children can emulate, which is something that I had talked with some of the mothers at Sunday school about. They don't know a lot about the saints because a lot of their stories are in different languages. And just to share with them, some of the saints that Moses likes and what are some of the things in the lives of these saints that the children could then take and use in their own lives.
Who is Moses' favorite saint?
I think his favorite saints has to be the 3 youths in the fire. he really loves that story. Just, they go into the fire, they are literally on fire for Christ, and they are not burned. And then, Nebuchadnezzar and everything like that. He really loves that story.
And it's probably or how is it the radio show like received in the community? Do a lot of people who aren't Orthodox hear it too, and do you hear from them on how they've received it?
No, I don't hear a lot because I don't, we don't travel through Albania a lot, I guess you could say, but through Instagram and through Facebook and through our grocery store, actually, there are a few people who have messaged me, or I've talked to them in person at the grocery store, and they say, oh, we listen to your radio show, we follow you on Instagram. It's really neat that you're doing that for us, and that you can record it in Albanian and we can understand and then share it with our own families. So it's been received pretty well. Also, the bishops like it a lot, which is very good. And now that the radio is throughout the whole country, it really is good for the church here in Albania.
That's really cool. I like hearing stuff about that. Just the creativity on how to share the faith and how it's received across many boundaries, and having it being heard throughout the entire country of Albania. I got
having to go anywhere. Just
no, that's
important
really
now
awesome.
with the pandemic.
Yeah, because that type of ingenuity is something that we wanted to do by starting these interviews, because you can do so much more, or you can do more even not having that face-to-face time with an individual, but being able to have stuff that people can reflect on later on in a certain time period can be really helpful and lead to many more discussions later on. So moving on. So what type of coworkers do you need in the field? And can you tell us about the efforts new missionaries might serve going into the field? Because I know I believe you work with many of our missionaries who are currently in the field, like the Hoppies.
Mm-hmm.
I always get it wrong.
Yeah.
The Bendos, Pamela, Anastasia Barksdale, and the McDonalds.
Yeah, and how often do you guys interact with each other? And being able to receive new missionaries, what do you look forward to in their arrival? And also, what does the field need with new missionaries coming in?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know that we have two missionaries who are inside their pre-field stage.
Mm-hmm.
So Steve and Theophani, who I believe you interviewed just a couple weeks ago. So I think that we're looking forward to them coming out to Albania. And I know that they are going to be involved, of course. So one of the things is when you go into the mission field, you have to be willing to see what the needs are inside the country. And you may go there, you may, like when I came here, I thought that I would be running a youth coffee shop that would administer to the students of Albania. But we came here and they decided that it'd be a little bit different where they wanted me to be working. So you have to be open and you have to be flexible. But as of now, Steve and Theophani should be working pretty closely with the other missionary team here, working with the youth, working with the radio station, and along those lines to begin with. And of course, during those first years, enculturating, learning the language, learning the culture, things like that. I know that here inside Albania, one of the great emphases that is teachers. So we need people who can teach English as a second language. It really helps the prestige of a school in Albania to have native speakers teaching. That's something that they really like. I know also that they need PhD holders who can teach at Logos University to help with the accreditation of the school. Currently, the theological school offers a bachelor's degree, but they're hoping to make it also be able to offer a master's degree. And then eventually, of course, a PhD as years have continued. Along those lines, not only do we need missionaries to come and help with that, but they also are looking for exchange students. So people who can come as an accredited university on the Bologna system. So if people are interested in coming and studying here inside Albania, I know that the school is open to accept applicants, and it's really a beautiful experience here.
Is that from other seminaries exchange programs?
Yeah, so actually you could do, so I guess it's not as much as an exchange program as in they are welcoming for people from other countries to come and study. So let's say you were a young adult inside the United States, you could come and you could study in Albania and receive your degree. And now that it's accredited, that degree would carry the same weight as if you got a degree inside another country like Greece or Romania or somewhere like that.
Okay, interesting.
And have you been spending any time with the other missionaries, and can you give an example?
So we're really blessed here in Albania, where we live in Tirana. Upstairs, just 3 floors, is the Bendo family. And then if you go to the other side of the building, we have Pamela Barksdale. And in addition, we have 6 other Albanian clergy families who live in the same building. And the Hoppies are just a 10-minute walk away. And the McDonald's are in Shemvlash, which is a little bit further away. But often we see the other missionaries at church. Before the pandemic, we would try and get together, have dinner together, coffees. And now that the pandemic has happened and things are slowing down a little bit at nighttime, a lot of the missionary kids and the Orthodox kids will get together at the field of the school downstairs. So it's another opportunity for them to all be together.
I think
I
that's
didn't realize how close you guys were.
Yeah.
All in one building. I was thinking everyone's like spread out.
No, it's like living at seminary. It's a really nice experience. We really enjoy being so close to everybody.
That's really important though also for the missionaries, is you come from a different culture and there's always going to be a little bit of a difference between someone from a foreign culture and someone who's native. So you're going to miss things. You're going to, I mean, for example, we just had 4th of July. And so we're used to having normal celebrations for 4th of July. In Albania, of course, there's no understanding for 4th or no purpose to celebrate 4th of July. So you get a little bit nostalgic, and being so close to the missionaries is a great support. You're just supporting each other, strengthening each other like that. I know one of my favorite things we've done so far is right behind the city, there's a large mountain, and we get snow rarely. And so one day when it snowed, all of the missionaries, we got together and we hiked up to the top of the mountain through the snow, slipping and sliding, trying to avoid trees. And it was just a great time to be together and to bond with each other.
You guys are like one big family, which sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
And I know that they're having a missionary family life. There's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of differences. Can you go into a little bit of what those differences might be?
So one of the main differences, it was actually quite big when we came to Albania, Stephanos and I, is when we would celebrate a holiday or a feast day like Christmas or Easter. And, you know, in the States, most of the time people don't have liturgies in the morning on Christmas, and it's all just a huge family day, or Thanksgiving or Pascha. It's just a very big family day. People visit each other. And here in Albania, especially since we've had kids, it's been a little bit more difficult, but also really amazing because we're so centered around the life of the church and the work that we're doing in the church. And so we'll wake up before the sun rises, we'll go to church on Christmas, or, you know, at nighttime for Pascha, Stephanos will serve, I'll take the pictures, Moses is the altar boy, and then we have to grab a quick snack. We go to the reception for the Archbishop where he welcomes dignitaries and government officials. I take pictures, Stephanos helps and make sure that everything goes smoothly. and then we come home, and by the time we come home, it's like 3 or 4. We have to process all the pictures, get them to the church, and then our family in the States is finally waking up, and we can, you know, FaceTime them or Skype them and talk to them a little bit. But that probably has to be the biggest difference that we experience here in Albania.
I think also going back a little bit to being why it's important to be with the other missionaries, just being a foreigner inside a different country can be a little bit difficult. You go from being a functioning member of society to starting over, and it's almost like you're a kid again. I remember when we first came to Albania, it took me an entire day to figure out how was I supposed to pay my utilities. And I mean, it was something that was just like second nature in the United States. You go online, you find the address, you either send in a check, pay online, whatever. Whereas here it was this much more difficult process. And it's not just that, but it seems like there's so many things that you take for granted that you have to relearn from the absolute beginning. Mm-hmm. And it's actually interesting because this allows you to experience the love and the support of the people around you, who help teach you the culture, who help teach you the language, who help teach you all these basic things that they would have learned as kids, as young adults, as teenagers. Mm-hmm. And they kind of raise you in a sense and take you from being this unfunctioning infant who needs their hand held into being a full member of society again.
When we first came to Albania, I refused to go fruit and vegetable shopping because like they would tell you how much it cost for all your fruits and vegetables that you got, but I could never understand what they were saying. And so I would always make Stephanos go to do that part. And now it's like, you know, you have to go every day grocery shopping because things spoil very quickly. It's not very processed or anything like that. And we have a relationship, you know, with the fruit and veggie people, with the people at the grocery store. They know the boys, they know all about us. And it's really like, you know, it's just another part of having a family here in Albania on top of the missionaries and everybody else that's close to us in the church.
Yeah, like an extended family.
Community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
And it's like that community there, that village is helping raise you guys and your boys, which is, I don't know, it just sounds really nice hearing how welcoming communities are to missionaries when sometimes you feel like you don't know what that connection is going to be.
Yeah, I think it is one of the great blessings is you do get to experience that, and you have to take a step back and accept the help and allow yourself to become a baby again to a certain extent. But then when you do that, it's amazing how beautiful and how warm and loving people are.
Yeah, being able to let go and welcome new teachings in.
Okay, so what is the next step for Albania?
So let's see. I think the next step for Albania is that it's basically a continuation on this road that has been started. You know, every missionary effort has as its goal the creation of a self-sustaining, autonomous, or autocephalous church. In Albania, it was a unique situation because although it had already received autocephaly, it was subsequently destroyed. And a lot of work has been done to rebuild the church. I mean, we have a synod of bishops, which to go from having just a handful of clergy who were on basically their deathbeds almost, to having a full synod is an amazing thing. To all of these beautiful churches, all of these beautiful efforts. And what you'll see is that the question comes up, is it self-sustaining? So much of what has happened is related to the person of Archbishop Anastasios. I mean, really, I don't know if anybody else within the Orthodox Church could have realized what he realized. And the church is continuing to grow, but so much needs to be poured into the church to realize its continued growth and to realize it getting to the point where it's, how to say, like almost self-propagating. I mean, now we have a lot of aid that comes in from other countries. both you have like visiting professors who will come and teach, you have people who go outside of the country to study, you have funds that come into Albania, and all of these things help make all of this amazing work possible. But the question is, can you really rely on that?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a huge step, is a transition from this model to a model of a self-sufficiency. And I know that's been a really big thing for the Archbishop, is how does the church become self-sufficient? Not just actually for the Orthodox Church. I actually interviewed a Muslim as part of my studies, and he was speaking about how the Muslim community here inside Albania, before the fall of communism, all of their all of their income was generated by the numerous properties that they had.
Mm-hmm.
Communism came, the government took away all of the church properties, all of the Muslims' properties, and when communism fell, they only returned a small percentage of them. So all of a sudden, all these communities can't support themselves, can't find ways to be able to finance their efforts. And what happens is they had to turn to outside sources. And thank God, inside the Orthodox Church, we had Archbishop Anastasios, who was a strong enough figure that he was able to take all of the interests that may have been using funds as a way to create division and to be able to consolidate them into the Orthodox Church of Albania here and keep things together, keep things strong. I know in the Muslim community, that's a serious issue that they face, is when people are donating to their community, how do they maintain control over the community to keep it moderate? A lot of times people will use funds to try and radicalize it. So all of the communities are trying to attain self-sufficiency. I think that one of the great things that they've done here is we have now built 3 hydroelectric dams, and these hydroelectric dams were built between donations, and they even had to take out some bank loans to be able to help build them. But they were built with the idea of trying to replace some of the income that was lost from all of the properties that the church had. And something else that was really beautiful about this is that inside the creation of these hydroelectric dams, Archbishop Anastasios decided that a percentage of the profit that the hydroelectric dams realize is not only going to go to the Church of Albania, but also a percentage is going to go towards foreign mission work. So it's this idea of building the church inside a way that it's not only self-sustaining, but also looks out towards the rest of the world and looks about taking care of the rest of the world.
That's really cool. I wouldn't expect a hydroelectric dam to be built to help alleviate this need, which is really wonderful. And I don't know if you would know this, but is there a way that the Church of Albania is considering sending missionaries, and especially in this question of self-sustaining? Because I know not just for the Church of Albania, a lot of the churches across the world are struggling with sustainability. Can they be, whether there's a dependency or they're in the process of self-sustaining?
Yeah, so I know that eventually, as a long-term goal, this is definitely there. I mean, you'll see, like inside our seminary, we're teaching missiology as a required course. You'll see, I mean, within the hydroelectric dam, there's this idea that they were going to give a percentage of the proceeds to go to other missionary efforts. You'll see I believe every Pentecost, the churches pass a tray that goes to support missions work. And all of these things are things that, I mean, even in the United States, we would consider pretty revolutionary.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely a care and an interest for missions. I don't think that the Archbishop feels that the church is ready to start sending people yet. But all of the pieces that are in place to start creating that and to foster that are in place. And eventually that's the goal.
That's awesome. Very excited for the church.
Yeah, us too.
Especially in that region. It's
good,
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now we loved hearing a lot about what's going on in the Church Albania. I know I've been educated just listening to the two of you and our ministries that are going on there. I would also like to hear from you guys into any advice that you have for because we've done this with all of our interview videos, asking the pre-film missionaries any advice that they would give someone who's considering a vocation and missions. And we thought it would be a great opportunity to get it from those who are currently in the field. So any advice that you have for those that are watching or could be watching?
I think that the main advice that I could give for people wanting to join the mission field is to pray about it, to, go into a conversation with God and to see what his calling for you is, because everyone is called to the Great Commission to be disciples of all nations. But is God calling you to do that in your own city, or is he calling you to travel to a different country and to do that? And I think to pray, to talk to God, and to listen, to discern what he is calling you to do personally.
How has being in the field impacted you spiritually, physically, just in general?
So, I think that I was a little bit naive and romantic, I think, when I came into the field. I really, 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 somewhere deep inside me wanted to be inside someplace like the desert of Turkana. And, I had this very romantic vision of missions and what it was. And I think that the Orthodox sense of missions is much more nuanced than it's portrayed inside popular culture, or that I had at least understood it. It's not pamphlets, door-to-door knocking, but it's deeper. I mean, on a wider scale, you see that the purpose of missions is it's transforming culture and society as it comes in contact with the gospel. I mean, it's not just individual people that are being baptized by their and coming to know Christ, but it's an entire culture, an entire people that are doing that. And when that happens, you can see a flowering of that entire culture. But then also narrowed down, missions, it's very personal. Walking around town, riding the bus, all of these day-to-day actions that you do. A lot of times, eventually, people will realize that we're foreigners, and they'll be like, "Oh, where are you from?" The United States. "Oh, why did you leave America? Why did you come to Albania?" Because a lot of people in Albania, they want to go to the United States, so it's strange to them. And from there, this kind of leads into a opportunity to be able to witness to them the message given by the church here to the people. And you can share just a little bit about what you believe, just very simply, just a little tiny bit, and just little tiny points of contact to just how you interact with them. You try and treat them with love. I mean, all these kinds of things. I mean, I think that's a large part of what day-to-day missions looks like.
Mm-hmm. Like planting little seeds. Has this experience, actually being in the field, changed your, I guess, definition or what the Great Commission means to you?
I think personally for me, when, we first went to Turkana and, we were going village to village, teaching them, I was doing kid lessons, teaching them about the icons. It was really that's what I thought it would be like day to day. And Frontier Mission, people have never heard of Jesus before. They've never heard of the Virgin Mary. They've never heard of Christmas. And to come to Albania, it was a total 180. But I believe that now what we are doing is important for us, and it is also as important for the Albanian people. And, it can't be romanticize that, you know, you're just going to pack up a bag and go to the mission field and you're going to change everybody's lives. But at the same time, you know, you have to reflect and realize that you are not doing this for yourself. You're doing this because God called you to make disciples of all nations, and you're doing this to help other people get to the kingdom of heaven.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to be able to connect with each other from these great distances that we have. We ask that you may bless all those who have listened to the work that is being done here inside Albania. May you inspire them to be able to be sharers of your word inside their own personal Jerusalem and Judea, and Samaria, and then also to the ends of the world. This we pray in your name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Father Stephanos and Presbyter Alexandra, for joining us and for speaking with us about your work in Albania and also the church in Albania, because I know a lot of our viewers are wondering what's going on over there. And for this being our fourth Facebook video, we really appreciate everything that you've done, and especially what you have done to demonstrate your commitment to Christ's Great Commission to make disciples of all nations. For anyone who has been watching and who have left comments below, we are going to do a short extra video answering any questions you may have. So please feel free to add the comments. And for my dog wants to get in. Hold on a sec.
Cut.
Come on, Bruno. He's very high maintenance. And for anyone who would like to hear more information or acquire more information about the Ritsi family, please visit our website at ocmc.org to find out. Hold on. For anyone who would like to find out more information about the Ritsi family and their ministry, please join us on our website at ocmc.org. And also, I know you guys have different medias on how people can reach out to you. Do you want to share those real quick? And I think we'll have those pop up down below.
So for Facebook, you can visit us at Ritsi Missionaries, facebook.com/Ritsi Missionaries. And then Instagram is homemaking_missionary.
And also feel free, if any of you want to get in touch with us by calling us, you can Viber us or WhatsApp us. And it's just our Albanian number, which you'll see on the screen. And you can just send us a message on WhatsApp or Viber or call us. And finally, you can also use Google Voice, which is just like calling anyone else in the United States or texting anyone else in the United States.
Oh, that's good to have.
It is, especially being in the field here.
Yeah, and I know you guys might do video calls with anyone who might be interested, maybe with their church community.
Yeah, definitely. We're definitely open to that. Coronavirus is really changing how we interact with people. I know we were supposed to come back this summer for furlough, and because of the virus, we're going to stay here inside Albania. So we'd definitely be interested in engaging with some different parishes and groups. And so definitely just email us or message us and we'll get in contact with you.
Excellent. Thank you. And anyone else that would like to learn more about OCMC and how to be involved in missions or interested in a vocation in serving abroad, please contact us. And Milica, you have what's the best way for anyone who's interested in missions to contact the Mission Center?
They can email us at missions@ocmc.org, and it will come to me and Margot.
All right.
And we'll go from there.
Excellent. So everyone, thank you for joining us. We'll be in touch with answering those questions you left in the comments, and we hope you have a wonderful and blessed day, and continue to stay safe and follow the social distancing guidelines that you have in your communities.
Stay
Got to be
healthy.
safe out there. All right. Thanks,
So,
everyone.
God bless you all.
And thank you, Father Stephanos. All right, let's give a wave goodbye. Bye, guys.